Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Top Cyber Pro Podcast. I'm founder and CEO Jim West, and we have a wonderful guest today that has given some time to share with you kind of the day in the life of a SOC analyst, incident response, incident handler. She has her own business that's making waves in the industry, so we're going to talk a little bit about her business as well. But without further ado, I have Quinn with us.
Yeah, hey, nice to meet you, Jim. And thanks for having me on the podcast or on this channel. Yeah, I guess about me. Yeah, I own my own business, Blueberry Security. Uh, it's an incident response consulting business and SOC transformation. Um, I also do mentoring for entry level people looking to get into cybersecurity, and yeah, and I'm going to
Awesome.
share insights.
So when we hear the term incident handling, a lot of folks, whatever cert they're studying for, whether it's like Sec Plus all the way to like CISP and everything in between, there's usually an aspect or a part of that knowledge base or domain of that cert that's going to speak to a little bit about the incident handling process and the different parts of incident handling. Phases that you go through. Could you maybe quickly take us through? Because I know you have a lot of SAN certifications, and guys, I'm going to just say right now, Quinn has 9 GIAC certifications. So, for anyone that's familiar with GIAC and SANS, one thing, these things are not cheap by no means. Their exams are usually 1K or a little bit more, plus the materials and the training. It is a serious investment into a career. So, having Quinn on as the level expert that Quinn's at with 9 GIAC certifications, it's no joke. So a lot of expertise on the other side of the screen for me. But with that being said, could you give us kind of a quick overview of the processes of handling an incident?
Yeah, but also I wanted to just correct one thing you said. The SAN certifications go anywhere from like 4 to 8K for the training
For the
material and
training.
exam. Just wanted to,
Yeah.
briefly say
Well, the
that.
exam itself, just the exam voucher is
Right.
usually 1K, but if you get the whole books, material, and the training, yes, you're absolutely right. It goes super high, sky. So, easily that's near counting your other certs as well, because has other certs like CompTIA and Splunk and some others. Easily $100,000 invested into the career. So that's just phenomenal, a significant investment of time and just everything involved in the gaining that technical knowledge. So again, thank you for correcting me. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And so your question was one more time, just general
Oh,
incident
so
response
can
process?
can you just kind of give anyone watching, because let's assume some of the viewers, if they're a cyber professional, they kind of already know the process of handling an incident. But if someone's brand new and saying, "Hey, I've heard about it, I'm interested," maybe they've been involved in their business in an incident, but they weren't part of the other side of it, the cyber side of it. So could you give us a kind of a quick overview of the different phases or parts of an incident?
Yeah, sure. So I guess the ones that I operate on are like SOC and IR. So the initial detection and then the response to those threats, primarily what I work on. So a SOC generates alerts, and then we go through those alerts and we determine what's malicious or what's not malicious. And in the event that something is actually potentially like malicious, and maybe somebody's trying to hack this company, that's when we kind of began the IR process where let's say they'd call my company and I'd come over and I'd kind of go and find the actual root cause of what happened and really validate that a cyber attack is actually occurring and try to stop it before it continues.
Yeah. So it's much akin to like being like Batman or being a detective on the crime scene where you're trying to quickly find the root cause or what started this. So one, you could stop it from happening again if it's still in the network or enterprise. But two, ultimately to, you know, stop it from happening maybe to other businesses too. And so when you mentioned the detection part, we hear a lot these days, because for the past year plus it's been AI this, AI that. From your perspective, what do you see AI as far as it either augmenting the capability of detection, assisting it, or is it going to eventually overtake the human element of the detection phase?
I th so I think that AI and cybersecurity is a little bit hard to understand because I think like the purpose of hiring somebody like me is to really have accountability and trust over what's going on.
Hmm.
So there are a lot of companies doing AI products, and I do think AI is the future. But in order to get to that place where we're using AI to do everything, you really need to be able to trust the tool to operate on its own. And so a lot of new companies in this industry are like, we're gonna replace L1 SOC analysts, or we're gonna um, be a replacement for like advising services or something. And a lot of times, I do think that those products have a lot of value and a really strong future. But AI today, I don't think can just replace what we do. I think it's a tool that we can use to make it better. So, like for SOC analysts, we often write reports about what we see. I think that it's a tool that we should be using to make those reports better and more meaningful. But I don't think that you can't just generate an alert and say, AI, go rate me about, what happened, because a lot of what we do is digging deeper into events and determining what actually happened, not just what the alert fired on.
Yes, yeah, and so you get into this world of like the indicators of compromise, indicators of attack, and so forth. And there's a lot of jargon and acronyms that folks can learn. And hey, I'm going to have a kind of a glossary link in the description below for anyone that wants to learn about these acronyms, the jargons for incident handling. And then, of course, threat intelligence plays a role in that. So, since I just brought up threat intelligence, where do you see the industry as far as leveraging feeds of threat intelligence to bolster that perspective into an enterprise or a company's security?
Yeah, so I think there's the way that it's actually being used and the way it should be used. So I think that threat intelligence is essentially, you ingest these data sources from other companies, or you get all this data that kind of tells you these are what threat actors are doing in your industry to attack you. Um, Typically, though, it's not used properly. I don't think companies really understand how do you turn that into detections, or why are you turning that into detections. Oftentimes, it's just left kind of as a news feed, and they're like, okay, well, the SOC analyst should go and read about it. The reality is the way it should work is you have your MISP, or your kind of your data source that's giving you meaningful, actionable threat intelligence, and then you have your detection engineering team that should be ingesting that data and then turning that into detections, which you can then use for your business and in your SOC to protect yourself against cyber threats that are specifically targeting this vertical or your business in particular. For example, if you're in telecom, maybe you're dealing with like a, Salt Typhoon or some other threat actor like that, and you get intelligence that tells you where they're coming from and what behavioral indicators to look for. And then you can create detections around that to stop it from happening.
And the great thing about, the threat intelligence is, again, it's still, I think AI can get you so far, but then it takes, some expertise and some knowledge of how that enterprise, that business operates to be able to tailor those signatures, if you will, for that detection library and purposes, because you can actually hurt yourself by hampering or slowing down traffic, if you will, or over analyzing traffic that's legitimate traffic, right? And so I know there's a couple frameworks out there. I'm a big fan of the MITRE ATT&CK framework as far as kind of show the tactics and tools and techniques that attackers use and APTs out there use. What is, again, from your perspective and the work that you do you see MITRE ATT&CK, gaining more visibility amongst people in this field, or do you think that there's other frameworks or other tools that are maybe better or comparable to the attack framework from MITRE?
I think there are other frameworks that work well, but I think MITRE is by far the most well known and the most recognizable and easiest to use. So I'm not actually even going to call out anything else, but I will say though, I think that again, like along with the threat intelligence, I don't think people are using MITRE ATT&CK the way it's intended sometimes. Like you shouldn't be like, okay, I'm using MITRE ATT&CK, so I'm going to create an alert for every MITRE ATT&CK thing in this framework. What you need to do is you need to use that intelligence to determine how does that apply to the framework. In other words, like what specific behavioral indicators um, correlate with what parts of the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and then use that to create the detections, opposed to just saying, you know, let's do everything in MITRE ATT&CK.
Wonderful. When we earlier when I was asking, we were talking about the different phases of incident handling. You mentioned, there's the detection, which is super important because if you can't detect it, it's just roaming around your network, possibly moving laterally, privilege escalation, all the bad things you don't want to have an attacker do in your network. But then you eventually, like you said, you go on site, you're helping the customer, one, detect to get to the root cause. And of course, one of the things a lot of businesses and in public, these businesses have felt horribly at is that not only the containment, containment's important because you got to stop the bleeding, but then the next phase is the eradication. And that's so, so important. And a lot of businesses flounder that because they want to get back into operation. So I think the most classic case that I know was very public was when the Sony PlayStation Network went down. And then within, I forget, 72, 84 hours, it took about 3, 4 days. But once it went back online, they were quick because all the gamers in the world wanted to get back to the service, right? They went too soon, and within less than I think it was less than 16 hours, they had to take it down again because they didn't effectively eradicate all the artifacts, and the attackers were able to get right back in immediately. So, from your knowledge and experience, how detection is super important. I think all the phases are important, but at the end of the day, if you do bring like an expert like yourself, if a business is bringing you on board, and you get to that point, what is the challenge of informing the business of that, the importance of that eradication? Because, you got that time balance. Like we want to get back in the business up and running again, but we don't have time to, do a bit, a full restore from, old backups. They got to get back into business. How do you handle that, as a business owner and consultant, and you're advising these companies that delicate balance of, going back into operation, but hey, we got a job to do to eradicate.
Yeah, so I think that like root cause analysis is like the most important part of the incident response process because ultimately, like if you don't know how they got in, you're not going to be able to stop it from happening again. And I'm not just talking about, okay, they brute forced you or something like that. Like what I'm saying is if you don't study like what they did when they got in, how they got in, and just retrace their steps, then you're right. They may actually stay in the environment and typically on my instant response engagements, that's the most important piece of it. But I would agree. I think most businesses they don't really understand the importance of cyber attacks, and they just want to get back online because they want to make money. They want to serve their customers. They have other things to do, and it's just this is not something that they want to get stuck doing. And I think it's really important to do it right the first time and really spend that time to go through and you may not want to spend 20 to 40 hours doing just IR with multiple incident handlers, and it feels like you're just losing a ton of money. And sure, you are, but you got to think long term about how is this going to impact your business if you don't do it properly.
Of course, and in business, reputation is everything. So, like in Sony's case, it did not look good, and I believe they ended up having their CIO and CSO step down as a result of that second attack. So, again, reputation is a very important thing for businesses to protect. And so, I would always advocate, hey, until we're at least 90+% sure we've eradicated, let's hold off because again. Getting taken down again does not instill stakeholder investor confidence into a business. Again, reputation being everything. Is there a story that you could share from your work in the IR, IH, and SOC field that where it was either miscommunication, misunderstanding, or a moment where you were talking one language? Because sometimes in cyber we're talking our language or talking our jargon, and we're trying always to try to translate it or give what I call what's the word I'm looking for is like a comparison or there's a better word for it, but I'm trying to correlate it to something else to make it easier to understand and where you kind of there's a misfire. Have you ever had a situation like that?
In terms of just like
Like if you're working with a
miscommunication being
customer or even with a SOC team, let's say you get brought in as a consultant and you're working through an issue or a project or something with a group of folks, whether they're the stakeholders or SOC members or other cyber people, and you have that either that language disconnect or you're both looking at the same problem, but then you're not in sync with how to address it.
apologies. Yeah, so I do think this is actually a common problem. I am horrible at communication. I'll be very honest. I have always been very introverted in my life, and I lack a lot of communication skills that are very essential. But I think like even if I didn't lack those skills, there's just miscommunications that happen when we do this. I think like one of the most common ones is like if you are working internally at a SOC or IR team at a private or well, I guess public business too, but if you're working internally, a lot of the executives or other departments don't really understand like why does this need to stop business right now? And so there's been times when I've worked with other teams and I've said, "Hey, we found clear text passwords being
Oh
sent over
yeah, not
HTTP."
good. Yeah.
Well, and they go, okay, well, what's HTTP? Why does that matter? Why does it matter that's in clear text? Like, why do we need to stop this right now? And I think it's very difficult to communicate urgency when you don't feel a threat actor breathing down your neck. Um, like I think like once you're breached, then you're like, oh fuck, I need to I need to figure out what's going on. I need to take care of it. But if you're not there yet, I think that cyber is often seen as like an expense or like a unwanted thing,
We're
like
just a
security
compliance
stopping us
check
from
the box
moving.
because we're told we have to have it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, Quinn, what I'd like to ask you now is, I know you're much younger than I am. I'm old as, I got all this white hair and I'm ancient. So, I'm part of the old guard, if you will. But I want to ask if we could go back to what your day one was, like the first day you made the decision that, hey, I want to get in technology, IT, cyber security, all of it. That's the path I want to take. Is there a story around that day one that you're willing to share with us?
Yeah, so I guess there's two versions of this story that I tell. I'll kind of tell the more honest one this
Okay.
time. The reality is, I always wanted to work with computers. I didn't know I wanted to do cybersecurity, but when I was a teenager, I moved to Europe for an exchange year, and I was like learning how to program. I was like making my own video games and stuff for fun, but there was a moment where I think everything in my life changed, where I realized I wanted to do cyber, and it's because a lot of the people I was hanging out with at school, I wasn't accepted by my peers because I was American and I wasn't Belgian. I wasn't, from Europe. And so I was actually hanging out with a lot of like people from Africa or from other countries because they were in the same boat as me where we're kind of ostracized.
Outsiders.
Yeah, and a lot of those people unfortunately were involved in crime and cybercrime, and so they taught me how to first of all they taught me how to speak French, which is very very useful skill,
Yes.
but they also taught me how to commit some cyber crimes, and we used to do things like we'd buy counterfeit money on the dark web, and then we'd go on vacation with it, or a lot of like I don't want to call them like dumb criminal activities, but like very like early stages of learning how to do crime, early stages of organized crime. And, that taught me what I needed to know about cyber, how criminals operate. And I knew I wanted
Exactly.
to yeah, at that time, I was willing to be a criminal, but I came home from Europe and I decided I didn't actually want to do that, and I kind of turned that into a career doing SOC and IR, and I got very lucky landing my first position. I remember I came back from Europe, and a few months later, I walked into a random cybersecurity startup and I said, "Hey." I'll do anything for an unpaid internship. Can I work here? And they said, well, we don't do unpaid internships, but we'll interview you for a full-time position. And I
Oh.
somehow ended up with that job and turned that into a career.
Wow, awesome. I love this. I mentioned earlier the huge investment that you've had to make into your certifications. And obviously, Top Cyber Pro, where we do cyber education and so forth as well. And one of the things we try to tell, I advocate to everybody that there's not one path to get into cyber. There's a million plus ways that you get inside. Like you said, you walked into business and offered to just work pro bono, and they actually it turned out that they hired you on full time. So that was a great story. And what people don't understand is that the industry is welcoming of everybody, whether someone's just out of high school or high school college dropout, or someone that's been 10, 15, 20, even 30 years in a career field and they feel burnt out and want to try something new. We need everybody's perspectives and experiences to come in and help fight the good fight, right? And so I'm glad you didn't stay in cybercrime. I'm glad that you came to be one of the good guys because we need, Quinn, we need you. We need a million more plus like you because as the threats, emerging technology, and faster and more powerful systems come aboard, it's just going to get worse and worse from the negative side of things. Of course, things are going to get better, our lives are going to accelerate. There will be some jobs lost because with every major technology advancement, from the wheel to, combustible engines to factories, there's and robots and so forth. But it's just part of generations and generations of work and adapting. But talking about your search, because again, this is very impressive. So, folks, 9 GAIAC certs, that's just astounding. Of those 9 GAIAC certs, I hate to put you on the spot, but is there one that really is near and dear to you? Like, like you really went after this one with just a passion and then just like a ferocity. Like this one of the 9 is the one that's kind of like your favorite. I know because the 9 is a lot,
Yeah.
but is there one that
I,
says
I
this is it?
Yeah, so I would say my favorite is probably the intrusion analyst one, GCIA, just
Uh,
because like I think the like Wireshark analysis and in-depth packet analysis really taught me the most interesting parts of my technical work that I've ever done. There's been times when I've had to like trace bank schematics and use packet captures to determine, where and how threat actors were
mhm,
getting fraudulent loans.
mhm.
So I really found the intrusion analyst certification super interesting. But the most difficult one that I did by far was probably it's a GCIA, which is the cloud.
Oh,
Sorry, not GCIA. It's the
GCSA,
no, not no. It's the I'm forgetting the name of it.
Cloud
Anyway,
Security
there's
Automation.
that one, GCSA.
Okay, yeah.
There you go. And thanks. And that one was the hardest. I actually failed that exam twice, and I think I ended up taking like 6 or 7 practice exams before I like was willing to take it again.
Was that one that's like less than 100 question, like a 75 or 80 question exam?
I think it was, yeah, and they
Yes.
didn't it was all multiple choice and I still
Yes.
did horrible on
So
it.
just to give somebody some insight into GAIAC tests, some of the first things a lot of people in the industry, some of my colleagues will be like, oh, this GAIAC thing, it's an open book exam. And they think it's easy. No. One, it's the right amount of questions for the right amount of time that they give you. So I'll use like GCIH, for example. It used to be, I think it was 125 or 150 questions at one point, but they gave you 4 hours. You think, oh, 4 hours is a lot of time. No, it's not. Because if you have the wrong books, or if your index, a lot of people build indexes with all the key terms and stuff to look up in their books. If your index isn't strong, you're page flipping looking for answers if you don't already know it off the top of your head. So it's a combination of your experience, what you studied, what you memorized, what good of an index you bought. A lot of people run out of time on these tests because they're just spending too much time looking for an answer. And so it's just because something's open book does not mean it's easy. So that's for one. And then the other thing is, again, you don't have the right materials. So if you got to get the SANS materials, they're super expensive, And even if you look on eBay, you might get one that's from like last year's test. They just updated it this year, and it's not going to do you any favors either. So you got to be really, really purposely dedicated to the study. When you're pursuing a GAIAC certification credential, you have to be all in. And so when you have one that is less than 100 questions, like a firewall analyst, a GCIA, and even this cloud automation cert, when there are less questions, it's even more challenging and more difficult. So again, to speak to the level of expertise on the screen here, those exams, and she's got like at least 3 that are under 100 questions. And so you got to be super committed. And what I say, you got to be all in when you're approaching the study for this. So again, I applaud you for your tenacity and going after these very challenging and difficult certifications. It's truly impressive.
Thank
Um,
you.
so I want to talk about now, if someone is saying, hey, all this sounds wonderful and interesting, where's step one? Like if I want to learn more about incident handling, being a SOC analyst or incident response and all of this, threat intelligence, where's a good step one? Whether it's a website that you would recommend, a news site, or even your own sites, where can someone connect you to start getting information and more information about this career?
Yeah, so my first day in a sock, I didn't know what a sock was. I remember I walked in and my new manager was like, "Are you ready for your first day in a sock?" And I was like, "A sock? Like stuff I put on my feet?" Um, but so I think that's the way I did it was different from most people. But usually when I recommend people doing um the bare minimum certification that people need nowadays to get into this industry is the Security Plus. I recommend people get this because there's government requirements to do it if you're on a federal government contract. Um, it's widely recognized as like the industry standard. It's a little bit simple for work nowadays. I would highly recommend looking into like TCM security certifications or like Blue Team Labs level one. I really like that one. I think that has the most like hands-on, interesting stuff to like learn out of any certification. But I would say for most people, like sure, I have a ton of certifications. It looks great, but I think that you get the experience from doing projects from like actually like doing hands-on things because the certifications I have, sure, they're great, but they're just pieces of paper. And there was a time when I had no degree, I had no certifications, I had no experience, and people still hired me, and that was mostly because of my background. And I think projects are the easiest way to demonstrate that. I think if you can put on your resume like stuff you did to show that, that's how you're going to get a job.
All right, excellent. The obviously, through your career, has there been people that have been like mentors or people that you looked up to, admired as leaders, or people that may have helped shape your career along the way? And this is really a question to kind of what I call shine a light on people that have been important to you in your career, whether they were a mentor, a manager, or just somebody in the industry. Like, you know what, that's who I wanted to be when I got started.
Yeah, so I would say there were a few. Probably one of the most important ones actually was my business partner at one point. You can look him up on LinkedIn, Isaac Abraha. He taught me everything I know. There was a time when I was an L1 analyst and I had accepted a new job at Medicare and Medicaid. And, he really taught me everything. At that point, I thought I kind of knew the basics, but he showed me how to think critically. And I think that's something that a lot of people in this industry lack. Like they just do the ticket. And I think that's really a mistake. And he showed me like over the course of like a 3 month period, he like walked me through step by step how to like investigate things and find root cause. And I just remember there was a time when I was looking through like FireEye or some other event, some other event source, and I had seen an email that was, I thought it looked suspicious right off the bat based on the file name. It ended up being ransomware, and somebody opened it. And he was the one who got me looking deeper and recognizing things like that before it happened. And then nowadays, I would say Douglas Brush from Brush Cyber. He is a really smart business owner, just generally a really talented CISO and really great mentor to me. There was a lot of people who mentor me though. I would say um, I am just a beginner, in like sure I do IR well, but cybersecurity is such a huge world, and there is always something you can learn from somebody. And I I am still learning, and I think it's something that I will be doing for 20 or 30 years before I can really say I'm like truly an expert.
And that's a great humble statement right there from Quinn. Anyone watching this, listening, you know, I also consider myself a perpetual student because there's always something new to learn, another new technology, and it changes, and we have to adapt. We have to adapt what we thought we knew to what the new realities are. So I love that. Being a perpetual student is really where it's at because that's what keeps us excited, invigorated to keep doing what we do, keeping the passion for cyber alive. I'd like to take a break because we did a little bit of technical talk up to this point, and thank you for sharing some of your stories and some of the people that you shown a light on for the mentorship and leadership they provided for you. I like to do this moment of levity in the podcast where we kind of take a pause on the technical discussion, and it's just some quick fire questions. There's no right or wrong answer, so if you'd humor me, I'm just going to hit you with some questions and just whatever the answer that pops in your head.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to start you with: is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yes.
All right, cake or pie?
Pie.
What kind of pie?
Maybe like cherry pie or apple pie.
Cherry wrap pie. Okay, good choices. Cold or hot pie? on that apple and cherry?
I
Cold or
like both.
hot?
I like
Both.
both.
Okay. All right. This one's going to divide the room. Star Wars or Star Trek?
I actually haven't seen either of those series.
Wow. I've had a few other guests the same way. They're like, I've neither. I've neither seen neither. So, wow.
I
Awesome.
would say Star Wars if I had to choose.
If
Yeah.
you had to choose. Okay. All right. What has been the most favorite book you've read of all time? And what was the last book you've read?
Yeah, so favorite book of all time, I think it was called the Affair of I read it in French.
Oh, okay.
Um the, the truth about the Harry Kubert affair.
Okay.
Um it was it was a book written in French about an author in the US writing a book about an author in the US who uh, was accused of murdering
Okay.
a
So it's
child.
kind of meta, an author writing about another author, right? In a sense.
Yeah,
Right? Okay.
very
And you read that
interesting.
in French, right?
Yeah, yeah. After the
Okay.
Moroccan drug dealers taught me French, so
Okay. Awesome. And what's been the most recent book you've read?
probably some kind of technical manual. I can't even remember. Also, I spend a lot of time learning languages, so maybe a book about how to speak Chinese,
Oh, okay. You're gonna do Cantonese or Mandarin? I'm gonna assume Mandarin.
Mandarin.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's probably gonna be a very dominant language in the next 10, 15 years anyway. But good definitely for
absolutely.
threat intelligence purposes and intelligence in general purposes. Um, what is there I know you have Blueberry Security and we could talk about that in a second, but outside of Blueberry Security and like kind of like what the day job is for most of us cyber professionals, a lot of us give our time, whether it's our time, energy, or money into like nonprofits and charities and causes that are near and dear to our heart. And so just kind of like the mentor question from earlier, are there any causes, nonprofits, charities, organizations that you want to shine a light on that's doing good in the world? And again, whether you give of your time, money, or energy to those causes, this is a moment for you to shine a light on them.
Um, do they have to be in cyber?
No, they don't have to be in cyber. It could be anything. I mean, I've had folks recommend causes that were like very specific to like a country overseas. Some talk, military causes, some that are just causes in their local town. It could be anything.
Okay, yeah, maybe the Trevor Project. They're like an LGBT youth organization. I don't know. I'm not huge on nonprofit work, but I would say probably the Trevor Project to
Okay.
donate to.
All right. Well, and if you give me the links for that, then their socials, I'll make sure they're in the description below. So you guys are watching, don't have to Google it. Just click, and you're there. Um, Blueberry security. So I want to talk about that now. So we talked a lot of tech. We've had our moment of fun of levity. So now, when it comes to Blueberry Security, what is the why behind making this company, bringing this company to life to the world? What is the why, and what are some of the services they do? And why should a business owner, if a business owner is watching this right now, why should they be requesting to book an appointment with you?
Yeah, so I think that like this industry is often dominated by like a new fancy tool, and I think we don't need any more tools. I think we actually do our work quite well, but I think the purpose of my business is to really say like, sure, we have all these tools, but we need to focus on like the human side of things. And so a lot of what I talk about is like, how do we train our people to actually catch cyber threats? How do we actually detect it? Because a lot of times SOCs are like noise machines. They'll generate like thousands and thousands of alerts every week, every day. And I think that in order to do this properly, we really need to take care of our people. And on top of that, we need to like make detections and make content that is more meaningful. And same thing with incident response. I think that like there's a lot of bad ways to do it, and there's a lot of good ways to do it. And I think if we just focus on the expertise, that's when you really have a lot of success with it. So like I, yeah, I would say that's the main reason.
Okay. And then, for a business owner watching this and they go to your LinkedIn or to your website what can they expect from getting services from Blueberry Security? Like, can you kind of give us I guess what I'm saying is more like the sales pitch. So if I'm a business owner, I'm going to say, hey, I like what I've heard. consult, have Blueberry come out and consult with me, what can they expect from that? Just generally
Yeah,
speaking.
so today we're offering two main services, which is incident response retainers and SOC transformation retainers. So the two services are very similar in the sense that we're handling incidents or we're preparing to handling an incident. Um, the purpose of hiring me to help you with this is a lot of companies are unhappy with how their SOCs are operating. It's
Hmm.
not uncommon that SOCs just don't do anything meaningful.
Yeah.
And so we want to take your sock from a compliance checkbox to like actually producing meaningful work that will stop bad things from happening and really save your business tons of money and headache.
Yes, I love that. So this is the point where we're getting to the end now of the podcast, and I like to give all my guests the last word. So, what is the statement, the advice, guidance, whatever you want to say? You have the next several minutes to give the last word to anyone watching.
Um, somebody was in another room, but so yeah, last word.
I know I'm
Um,
putting you on the spot. And folks, I did do send some questions to my guests, so they're prepared for a few questions, but there's a lot of questions. I'm putting Quinn on the spot. So again, my apologies, Quinn, for the question. But yeah, if you have any, again, it could be advice, guidance, recommendations, or just any statement about cyber, whatever you want to speak about, the floor is yours.
Sure. Yeah, I'll just say for people looking to break into cyber, I am offering mentoring. There's a link on my website or on my LinkedIn bio. I used to do it for free. I am no longer doing it for free because, well, I just spent so much time doing this. I want to have a meaningful impact on the people I work with. And yeah, so if you need advice, you're welcome to check those resources out.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, thank you so much for giving of your time and sharing your stories and your career with us and some insights in the IR incident handling and SOC life because, a lot of people hear it, they get excited, and they just kind of, need the insight. And thank you so much for offering that.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great evening.
You too.